Hello, everybody. Welcome to our discussion of Al Jazeera's documentary on the 1973 war. It was 4 parts. It was rather confusingly numbered. So they had an episode, like a part one, parts one and two, then a part two, then a part three, or rather episodes. But there are really four things that you should have watched. Everything should be posted in the description for this live stream. And I think what was interesting for me, obviously, this is Palestine Bookshelf. We're talking about the Palestinians. In a certain way, the Palestinians are somewhat excluded from this war. That this was much more about national pride for the actors involved than necessarily solidarity with the Palestinians. Why do I say that? Well, they had their own goals. So Sadat's goal is not to free or help the Palestinians, it's to take back the Sinai that was lost in the 67 war and to regain Egyptian pride. There's nothing wrong with that, but the idea that this was about the Palestinians is silly. So Egypt's military goals in the 1973 war were to find a way to push the Israelis out of Sinai, and they accomplished this. The goal for the Assad regime in Syria was, I think, to restore some national pride. Remember that Assad was the defense minister at the time of the 67 war. He wanted to flex his muscles a little bit, but both of them, stupidly, made the mistake of thinking themselves as the great commander in chief. Despite the fact that you're a political leader elected for different reasons, you think of yourself, you fantasize of yourself as this great leader on the battlefield. There's a photo in the documentary of Sadat reaching across what looks like a large map, probably indicating forces, as if he knows anything. And the general Shazli, the Egyptian general who conceives of all of this, he is ignored. And in his mind, Sadat's mind, we cannot retreat from where we are. It's a military disaster for the Egyptians. A much greater defeat could have been inflicted on the Israelis if Sadat had not gotten in the way. Assad, for his part, he doesn't coordinate with the expeditionary forces that came from Morocco and Iraq and other parts who are ready to fight and in fact inspired the Syrians who are feeling down about themselves. They find the Iraqis rushing to the front line, but they don't move anywhere, and once again the Israelis take the initiative. So as much as we can beat up the Israelis for not being vigilant about their borders, a lot of kudos has to be given. And remember, when we give kudos on this channel to the Israelis, we have to look at it purely objectively from a military standpoint. Mobilizing 250,000 men in 15 hours is extraordinary. And the Israelis have to be given credit for being able to do that. If the Syrians push in further to the Golan during the night, those 15 hours wouldn't matter. Now, it doesn't mean that the Israelis couldn't have pushed them back, because I believe the documentary indicates this, the tank superiority was so much so that even had the Syrians gotten further in to better positions in the Golan, the Israelis could very easily have pushed them back. Even though the Syrians were fighting for their own land, the Golan is occupied Syria. The Israelis also have this idea that any land that they take is also theirs. So they were fighting for their land as well. But these amazing tanks proved to be a big difference. But what was shattered was this Israeli miracle impregnability, which had come from 67, which had also been caused by military failures. So what's interesting is when you see the Israeli military engage later on, which 1973 we have, in 67 we haven't. We're talking with Hezbollah in Lebanon, with Amal in Lebanon, with Hamas in Gaza. The Israeli military doesn't do very well in hand-to-hand close-up fighting. But when they have a technological advantage, they absolutely do. When they have the aircraft that they did in 67, when they have the superior tanks that they did here in 73, they're able to impose their will on these Arab armies. So when we see that technological advantage taken away, and we have seen that more recently, the best they can do is stay even. But what happens more likely is you have these different groups who have for years been dreaming about taking revenge on behalf of Palestine, and the Israeli army does not do well. Look at what happened to them recently in Lebanon, and look at the fact that they did what they did to Gaza, and they still had a strategic defeat happen. So this 73 war is the last of what we see, I think, as it's an aftershock of 67, which is an aftershock of 48. But what is happening around the Palestinians and what it leads to, what we have it lead to is eventually this peace treaty with Sadat and Egypt sort of tying that off and saying, all right, we will work with Israel to control the Palestinians. They no longer pretend that they are going to help the Palestinians in any way. The Syrians, betrayed by the incompetence of Assad and that poor leadership there, content to leave the Golan occupied, which it is to this day an hour. And the other Arab countries, I think, for their part, sending expeditionary forces, they have to be applauded for that. But without clear objectives and without clear leadership, the same failures happen in 73 as happened in 67, as happened in 48. In each of these engagements, we see different levels of a failure of Arab unity around the singular cause of the Palestinians. And because of that, because understandably, national interests trump the let's say larger transnational interests of the Ummah, which would include the Palestinians within, let's say, the Muslim diaspora. Eventually, when you get pressured by the Israelis, you're going to fold in your national interests. So in some way, that's understandable for me that your national interest has to come first, and it's harder to intellectually support the Palestinian cause when it's Egyptian soldiers dying. But being able to look at all of the footage that and as always, Al Jazeera does fantastic works on these documentaries. Seeing all the footage and getting all of the actors, the people who were involved, being able to interview. I mean, they had General Shazli in the documentary. Being able to get that kind of reporting from people who were there is extraordinary. And survivors on both sides, both Israeli and Egyptian and Syrian veterans. It was really wonderful to read that. But I think this is an example of why I probably delayed getting to these wars. When I started my work on Palestine, started my studies, I was really focused on 48 because, and I'm very glad I did, because everything comes from 48, everything, both before 48 and after. After that, I think that the second most important date is 67. I think 56 can be understood in a smaller way. That's not what I meant to say. It can be seen as an aftershock of 48. So I don't see 56 necessarily as entirely separate from 48, involves the Egyptians. But then 67 gets us to now, and then 73 as an aftershock of 67. So not to say that it's not important, but the 1973 war would not be among the first, 20 things that I would cover about Palestine if I were to cover it. There's so many other things, but now that I'm starting to fill in more gaps and starting to see more connections, it is, as I would say, important. Also, thoughtfully selected, interesting enough, the 6th of October, not so terribly far from the 7th of October. The 6th of October, which was in 1973, the date of Yom Kippur, it also happened during Ramadan. So both sides were religiously in a period of purification, atonement, etc. All right, let's see what's going on in the chat. Hello from Michael. Hello, Michael. Any comments, questions? Hopefully you had a chance to watch this documentary or series of episodes in the documentary. If you haven't, I strongly recommend it. At least watch the first episode. I think it's only 25, 28 minutes. Second episode might only be, and then the other 2 episodes are about 45, 48 minutes each. But as I say, if you have to choose among the priority, Stephen, there are other ones I want to watch. I would say if you still need to know more about 67 or 48, understand those documentaries first before you come here. 73 really only makes sense if you know what happened in 67. 67 only makes sense if you know what happened in 48. So in your hierarchy of Palestine studies, this, I would say, is an extra credit assignment or a footnote assignment or a for further reading assignment. But it's not crucial because it didn't, as far as for the Palestinians, it wasn't a major change, but it was the beginning of the abandonment of Egypt for the Palestinian cause because it led to the demilitarization of the Sinai and then the eventual Sadat Begin treaty. All right. Well, if there are no other questions or comments, we'll end the stream for today. Thank you for stopping by. And remember that the work that we're doing here as the channel continues to move towards monetization is for the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. So any profits from the channel will go there if and when we do get monetized. And please take a look at what their work is, what they're please take a look at their website and look at the work that they're doing, helping Palestinian children get medical care, and consider supporting them directly. And you can support them indirectly by watching more videos from this channel and moving us closer towards monetization. All right, thank you all, and we'll see you on our next stream.